What's happening, guys and girls? Acrinator here, and welcome to the 25th episode of the Counting Pixelated Sheep podcast for the month of September 2017. I am joined, as always, by my partner in crime and co-host for this show, Sirjohnmac I.
Oh, hey.
Oh my god. And the articles we have for you today will be as follows. Nintendo claims to have over-delivered for Switch launch production. We'll get into context of that in a minute. And New York City GameStop's refusing to sell Switches without bundles. Everything about Nintendo today, minus the rambling section. So let's get straight into the first article, which was the Nintendo claims to have delivered, or over-delivered, or rather over-prepared, I guess would be the better word for that. So what happened is that Nintendo said that they had not expected the Switch to sell as much as it did, and I think that's not necessarily news. And they had sold about 2.8 million copies, and I think Breath of the Wild sold about 3 million copies. I'll have links to that in the description below for like the articles and stuff. I referenced a lot of the Wikipedia pages for these for various consoles for references in terms of how much they actually sold. And I was curious as to whether 2 million was a grave underestimate for launch or not. So I looked it up, and what I got was obviously the Switch sold 2.8 million copies at launch. The Wii U only sold 500,000 or 0.5 million copies at launch. And this is within the first quarter is what considered its launch, so the first 3 months. The PlayStation 4, conversely, sold 4.5 million copies. The Xbox One sold 2 million copies, so the Switch actually outsold the Xbox One in its first quarter. And then the Wii, back in the day, sold 3.2 million copies, but the Wii I still believe is the best-selling console of all time, if not it's the PS2 or the 3DS or something like that. But either way, it's and looking at a lot of the other Nintendo consoles, it's reasonable to believe that they really didn't expect anything to hit 2 million, because they've almost never hit 2 million. It's usually closer to 1.5 to less than a million copies, depending on the console you're looking at, as well as what time period they sold it and whatnot. So it's actually fascinating to see, and this statement that they had tried to over-deliver and overproduce because they were prepared to have backstock is coming from Reggie Fils-Aimé, the Nintendo America president. So it's actually funny to see, I know a lot of people gave Nintendo flack, yeah, sure, same thing with the classic NES, and but I don't. Actually, I should look at the numbers. I'll probably find that afterwards and post it in the sidebars or whatnot. But for now, it should be interesting, because if they did the same thing with the classic NES, then they maybe could have had a better understanding of how many people wanted it. But it seems, looking at the numbers and the statistics that are publicly available, as well as the links in the description below, granted those links are Wikipedia links, so take it with a grain of salt. If you can find a more official sales charts, go for it, but I know those you have to dig for a little bit. And that was a lot more effort than I was willing to give into this. Plus, Wikipedia is usually a ballpark, so you get the basic idea. And it does seem that I would rather side with Nintendo in this case, where it's reasonable to assume that they wouldn't have sold as many Switches as they did. Granted, I think Breath of the Wild is one of the first, if not the most accentuated case of a game outselling the console that you can play it on, that it's exclusive for. So it's just this whole big fiasco of Switches are in very low supply for the massive demand that there is. But I'm sort of siding, after reading this article and seeing more of the facts, not just in this article but outside, I'm more siding with Nintendo as to okay, yeah, it's reasonable to say that they had no idea they were going to be able to come up with that.
I feel like Nintendo only ever has two problems at launch. Is they massively outsell the amount that they have, and orders get backed up. I know that happened with the DS multiple times, with different releases. The Wii, oh man, Amiibos.
Oh yeah.
I swear there were people trampled over Amiibos.
Probably.
Or in the Wii U's case, they don't sell nearly as many as they expect.
Yeah, right. I feel like Nintendo is just one of the most polarizing companies in that regard, as to they either sell everything or nothing.
Yeah.
There is no middle ground. And it's like, you gotta feel bad for their sales reps, because it's like, how do you possibly expect, you know? Like, you can, I guess, try and get a taste of the market, and it's like 2.8 million units, and this is for launch. I'm sure they've sold more since then, because I think we're getting towards the end of the second quarter. Yeah, because it's September now. It was April when it came out, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so like, you know, at the end of October will be the end of the second quarter, and I'm sure they've sold a few more million. I know ultimately Fizame also said in this exact same statement that they are scaling up the production. Actually, that's an article that's linked in the article below explaining how they're doing that. But they're basically outsourcing to a lot more manufacturers to get 10 million units out within the first year of the Switch. So by next April, they're hoping to have 10 million units shipped, which if they can ship all of those and still have demand, holy fuck, Nintendo's just like would have been dominating this console generation if it wasn't for the PS4.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean they're not doing good, though. They are definitely doing good if, you know, that's their first quarter.
Yeah, I mean, selling out on your new flagship console.
Yeah, pretty much. Plus, you have, like, people are raving over it every day, it seems like. Just last week, I think they found the NES Golf in honor of Iwata. So, you know, they're just finding more and more things, and I've not heard very many things aside from the thing we talked about last month with, like, the docks not being necessarily the best, but that's, like, very minor complaint, and I haven't heard that many people complaining about it. So it seems like, despite all the skepticism, it seems like Nintendo's really pulling through with the Switch, aside from supplying for the demand.
Yeah, I wonder if the cost to make a Switch is, if it's similar to, like, the PlayStation and Xbox, and where they actually have to sell at a loss. Like, it costs more to make the system than they get from selling it.
I don't know, because I'm pretty sure Nintendo owns a lot of the manufacturing companies that make, like, I think it makes a lot of the stuff it does in-house, whereas Microsoft and Sony usually outsource possibly to each other for various things. I know Sony works a lot with hardware, and Microsoft obviously works a lot with software, so I wouldn't be surprised if those two companies intermingle. I mean, that brings up the point of, like, the new iPhone X, where the screen that they're using for the iPhone X is actually made by Samsung, who has a patent on it. So they're the only ones who can make the screen, which some economists have been theorizing that's why the iPhone X is going to be $1,000 or more, because they have to, you know, Apple has to recuperate that cost of paying the Samsung. So it's hard to say. I don't actually know. I don't know if that's sometimes companies keep that under lock and key, especially if it's something like Sony or like Microsoft. Granted, I remember hearing somewhere that Nintendo at least manufactures a good amount of their stuff in-house, in which case that would be, you know, something they'd be willing to share, because it's like, oh, you know, it's prideful, and, you know, we do all this in-house and it's all us. That's something I could see Nintendo getting behind.
Actually, from an article I found on Nintendo Life, it seems like they cost about $250 to make.
Oh, okay, so they are making about $50 profit just off of the base console per sale, which is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
In terms of actual dollars, but, you know, in terms of percentages, I'm sure they'd like it to be higher, but like you said, Microsoft and PlayStation are potentially losing money per sale, and they're probably recuperating some of that on the online servers cost, like Xbox Live, PlayStation Live, is it? Or PlayStation Now? I don't play
PS Plus, something like that.
I don't know. Isn't Nintendo doing something like that, or was that just what they were considering? Wasn't it like Nintendo Direct? Was it? Or is that something different?
I thought Nintendo Direct was just the name of their, like, press conference.
Let me Google it.
I would be really surprised to find Nintendo having some kind of, like, proper online system.
Okay, yeah, Direct is the press conference.
Because for the Switch, don't you have to do voice chat like through your phone or something like that?
Oh my god. Nintendo Switch Online. Nintendo Switch's online service will be $20 a year. That's not bad, actually, considering Xbox Live and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or you can get a 1-month subscription for 4 months or a 3-month subscription for 8 months, according to this article by Kotaku. That is... Oh wait, there's an update to it. They always put their updates at the bottom. That's so stupid. Okay, the update's just about Nintendo. Anyone who subscribes to that online service will get access to the library of classic games that will be perpetually added. I think that means perpetual access. I know at one point they were considering, like, you get 1 month to play this classic game and then it goes away for a few months until we bring it back, but I think they changed that. I'm not entirely sure. But if that's the case, like, especially with Splatoon apparently being a big thing, like a big online game, that's reasonable, I mean, like, World of Warcraft is fucking $15 a month, so I feel like that's decent. I feel like that's the way Nintendo has to do it, and it says, again, this article I'll also have linked in the description below, came out June 1st of this year, so relatively recent, and that should be coming at some point in 2018, according to Nintendo. So I guess it's just called Nintendo, what was it, Nintendo Online, Nintendo Switch Online.
You gotta give it to Nintendo for being able to sell a Switch, like a console like the Switch, with as comparatively little power as it has.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I think you can get an Xbox or a PS4 for like $150-$200 now.
I don't know, I don't follow console.
That might just be used, but still, like...
Maybe. Granted, it is capable of running, like Skyrim or Doom on the portable version at 720. That's reasonable. Like 720 I'm good with. Granted, my main monitor is about 720. It's a weird 16:9 ratio. It's like 1360 by 768, something like that, but it's effectively 720. And it's like, I'm fine with that. So, I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, it can't run 4K. It's like, who fucking cares? I don't care about the difference between 720 and 1080. It's like the difference between 480 and 720 is relatively large, I will admit, because you go from like partially fuzzy to pretty damn clear. But up to 1080, it's just like you're getting nitpicky at that point. So it's like, for everything that the Switch, thank you, motorcycle, for everything that the Switch offers, I feel like it's a relatively reasonable machine, which I guess is why it's so popular, because it can run, obviously Nintendo will always have incredible first-party support, but now it's actually getting third-party support.
This might be a bit off topic, but it kind of annoys me how consoles are turning this whole thing into like a resolution race, like the race to 4K. Maybe this is just me, but having a higher frame rate, I feel, is a lot more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. With the more recent Overwatch update, there have been some minor performance issues, like not major, but this happened last year too, and it happened from the Summer Games, which is actually one of the big reasons why I stopped playing, because I played from launch to the Summer Games, got to like level 50, and then from Summer Games to around this past May, I had gotten like maybe 30 levels. I was like level 80, and now I'm like 125, something like that, because I started like really playing it over the summer. And part of that was because from Summer Games to about Halloween, there were some performance issues where the frame rate would tank to about 30. Now normally in a game like World of Warcraft, I don't mind if it tanks to 30. I can tell, but it's like, I can still play. In Overwatch, though, you kind of need to be quicker, especially, I play Zenyatta as my main, so he's a very reactionary character. And it's like, I feel like FPS is much more significant. I would rather play a 480 game at 120 FPS than a 1080 game at, 15 or 30 even. I guess it depends on the game, though. If it's an RPG, especially if it's like a turn-based RPG, it doesn't really matter. But if a game requires reaction skills, it does need to be at 60 at least. Ideally, like normally I'll get Overwatch up to like 90-ish. I think I have it capped at 120, just because otherwise my machine's like, hey, let's go for unlimited FPS. It's like, please, just stop. It'll be like 300 FPS, but the resolution will downscale to like 144, and it's like, please, I can see everything, but it's not pleasant.
Oh god, I hate when the auto resolution decides that it wants to mess around.
Path of Exile does that now, without you asking it to. You set your target frame rate, which it goes as high as 60, and it's done that sometimes, and like especially in Act 5 and 10 when everything goes to shit. It's like, it's bad. It's like, I still have 60 FPS, but I can't fucking see anything. But yeah, I think that's all I have for this article. If you have anything else, speak now or forever hold your silence.
Yeah, I think we're going off topic now.
It's fine. It's fucking podcast, not scripted. Now,
Sure.
The second article, which is the New York City GameStop's refusing to sell Switches without bundles. This, I know they're both based around Switches, both articles, but they're both very interesting, and towards the end of this article, I think we're going to get a little bit further away from Nintendo and go towards more like GameStop. So basically, there are at least 4 confirmed GameStops in New York City that were refusing, and possibly are still refusing, to sell Nintendo Switches without buying a warranty or a bundle or something else. You know how the GameStop employees would always push you, really, like, would you like a warranty with that? Well, now they're like, we can't sell you this without a warranty, and this would hike up the price from the normally $300 to somewhere in between $350 to around $500 before tax, which, that's very expensive for something you really don't fucking want. And the funny thing I found about this was that this got up to GameStop's corporate, and the corporate level responded by saying they shouldn't be doing that, but that's all they said. It's like, they shouldn't be doing that. They're, let's see, where is it? GameStop was disappointed to hear about the 4 GameStop stores that were misrepresenting our mission of providing customers with the best service and products they want when visiting our stores. We appreciate Kotaku bringing this to our attention. The stores have been contacted and should no longer be an issue. That didn't really say anything about, like, this is unacceptable or anything. It was more just like, oh, we got caught. Okay, stop doing this, guys.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's no secret at this point that GameStop is a shitty company. I mean, like, the one in, over by the Walmart, John,
Yeah.
That one shut down. It's not there anymore. There's, Comcast, and it's split into 2 different stores now. It's Comcast and the hair salon.
Yeah. That's
not surprising, is it?
And honestly, as like a 21-year-old gamer, I feel like that's more appealing than a GameStop.
Yeah, right? Get decent internet.
Yeah.
That's all you need. It's like, I almost feel like a dick when I'm like, damn, I just want to see GameStop crash and burn. I wait for the day when they're like, we're shutting our doors permanently. But then I realize, like, they brought this on themselves. So I feel like less of a dick. It's like, when you look at the decisions they've been making over the past couple of years, more recently, I believe earlier this year or late last year, they officially implemented the, quote, Circle of Life concept, which basically, it means you want people to reserve and pre-order games. They come in and get the game. They hopefully buy a warranty or bundles with that game. They go home. Eventually, they'll resell that game to you. And then they'll buy, a new game and continue that circle where someone else can possibly buy that used game. And it's just this, like, big circle. And, like, on face value, on paper, it seems to be okay. But the way they implement it, and how hard they push for it is really, really scummy. It's like one of the articles linked below is basically a giant Kotaku article, actually Kotaku Australia from what I understand, but they take a lot of statements from a lot of current and former employees, many of which are from the US. What was it? And the corporate will post goals for each store to meet, and if they meet them, depending on how far they go within those goals, and they get certain points rewarded to the stores. And nowadays, it's probably to determine what stores are worth keeping and what stores are worth closing. But the goals for this one particular store, or possibly all stores, were as follows: they want at least 11% of their sales on reservations, PUR, I don't know what that is, pro renewals, 13%, pre-owned sales 34%, trades 22%, game protection guarantees, so warranties 20%, and hardware warranties 33% of their sales. So you can see like what they really are pushing for, because like pre-owned sales, so like selling used games, and selling hardware warranties, i.e. the Switch, are their big priorities. And I would like to mention that this article listing which is the separate article from the original one that's for this discussion. This article, with all the former and current employee statements, is from February of this year, 2017. So this is, much earlier. You could, this was very obvious, and I'm surprised that this wasn't a bigger issue to begin with, or at least more publicized, because it's always been an issue. But, even if you go further down into the main article for this discussion, you find that, the CEO of GameStop said, I believe a few months back, during their second quarter earnings for this year. So from April to June, July-ish, they had the CEO stated that the Switch was by far the biggest seller this year, and the biggest reason that GameStop was doing well, or at least better than they would be. I believe they're still losing a lot of profits.
Yeah. When you have a business model that is entirely reliant on used game sales, and more than anything, just physical media for games.
Yeah.
It's
in a day and age where, for one, Steam is a thing, so you're not going to get any PC sales. That is just not a thing that happens anymore. And basically the other big game developers for PC, i.e. Riot and Blizzard, sell off of their own platforms. So you're not going to get anything that's physical for PC anymore. Those who do usually get collector's editions, which again just come directly through Blizzard, for example, for Overwatch collector's edition, or expansions for WoW, stuff like that. And then for consoles, they're starting to dip into digital as well, so I feel like GameStop was sort of going the way of Blockbuster then. Although I believe Blockbuster is still around. I think they have a digital store or something. They invested in Netflix or something. I'm not sure. Is Blockbuster?
I just remember the story about Blockbuster having the option to buy out Netflix and not taking it.
They are still a company, and they are primarily online.
Well, I feel like there's no way that a store like that can still exist, or a business like that to still exist with the internet.
Yeah, right.
Without being online.
Yeah. Although I do miss, there used to be this little tiny video rental store. It was VHS primarily, back in this 2004, and they also had a little ice cream shop. It was just a mom and pop shop, but it was so cool. I miss that store. Now it's a freaking Subway or whatever. It's on the little corner right next to my street. I think we've passed by it a million times. But either way, I do miss that shop, mostly for the ice cream. But either way, going back to GameStop in particular, it's it's been no secret for years now. People have been lauding them for just being bad. I'm sure there's some really popular videos on YouTube of former GameStop employees that became, YouTubers and are like, making a video complaining about it. And like how they run their company. This was like, years ago, let alone right now where they're really starting to actually push Circle of Life. Whereas before, like a lot of the statements for the employees said like, Circle of Life isn't necessarily new, but they've officially started to push it within the company as of recently. And it's like, I can't find the exact post because there's literally like dozens of these statements from like employees to managers to seasonal workers, stuff like that. And some of them are even like, we would get like daily reminders through their emails saying like, oh, your store is not doing very well, you might get fired. It's like that's a lovely thing to hover over someone's head.
Yeah, it's just one of the most toxic and absolutely deplorable things that an employer can do to just like pit most likely minimum wage workers against each other, having like this kind of not necessarily a quota but implied quota, and just like
again I can't find the exact statement, but there was someone who said they were an assistant manager who was making, in New York State, that was making about 50 cents more than minimum wage, so it was like $10.25 at the time.
Yeah.
It's like that's it's like you can't create that level of stress and not compensate it with pay. Yeah, they're making, I found it, I magically found it. They're making $10.25 US in the state of New York, which is only 50 cents higher than the minimum wage at the time. And this was, February that they gave this statement.
Yeah. You have to...
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you just have to think that, like, that kind of stress to the point of, like, probably taking, like, years off someone's life.
Yeah, right.
And all for minimum wage, essentially.
Yeah, not only a minimum wage, but like according to this exact statement from this former assistant manager or whatever, it says that they would also run skeleton crews, so they had like maybe 1 or 2 people working at a time, so you couldn't much less go to the bathroom without temporarily shutting the door down, locking the door and shutting the store down, let alone like being able to take your lunch breaks. And it's like I've actually experienced this too, where companies will sort of like egg you on if you don't take your breaks, because it's like they're federally mandated to, they're required to give you breaks. So if you're not taking your break, it looks bad. But it's like in this guy's case, they'll have one guy, and it's like, I can't take my break. I'll just have to eat lunch or whatever at the counter and call it a break.
Yeah.
And it looks like they've been... it seems like one of the things GameStop has been doing, aside from just shutting down stores, is also lessening the hours of operation. So instead of like a full day, it'll be like half a day. It just feels like they can do no right, and it seems like the executives are just trying to hold on as long as possible to squeeze out that tiny bit more of profit before they, run on to the next company, if they can get hired to the next company. Because personally, if I was, in a corporation on a board of trustees or whatever, hiring a new executive, seeing where they came from, being GameStop, like, oh, they were the chief financial officer of GameStop. It's like, yeah, let's not. Let's avoid that hole in the ground that you pour money into with a wide girth.
Yeah, just very short-term, non-sustainable business practices that and it's not like pleasant from the consumer side either, because this was back in like 2013, 2012, so I imagine it's only gotten worse. But just the amount of stuff that you have to say no to just to get your game get out the door without spending $100 on like a used game and all this warranty.
Yeah, plus
stuff.
like you try to sell them a used game and they're like, we'll give you 50 cents for it, and it's like brand new AAA title, barely, you have like 10 hours on it. It's just like, I didn't like it. And it's like, look, I could go down to like the mom and pop game store and sell this for like $20, and then they can resell it for 40, because we both know that you're just going to resell it for 40. Actually, the funny thing is, I think downtown there is a mom and pop game shop that's like actually pretty lucrative, because they're actually gamers. So it's funny to see that. It's nice to see that an actual game shop is still around, but I'm also glad it's not GameStop.
Yeah. Sooner GameStop is out of business, probably the better.
Yeah, right. Is freaking GameFly still a thing?
If not, probably something like it.
It is still GameFly. Yeah. Actually, the CEO has been the CEO since 2003, so that usually means that the company's doing well. Because if the CEO wants to stay, it means they haven't fucked up that hard yet. I always found their business model interesting. It works better for console gamers, from what I understand, but I'd rather just own the game. Although I think you can do that, but no. That's all I've really got.
Yeah, that's all I really want to talk about GameStop.
Moral of the story is fuck GameStop, and Nintendo needs to hike up their production quite a lot.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the rambling section. And God, what has been happening? Path. God. I actually went through on my Necromancer a lot of the different acts. I wish what they would have done with the new edition is start every new character at the end of Act 4 and allowed you, even if you were just gonna steamroll through like seven acts all at once or whatever, you would have actually been able to do that and experience the story, because my Necromancer originally was my story character. Whereas now, I mean, technically she still is. She's the only character that started the new expansion, I believe it was 3.0, at the epilogue. Granted, some of the side quests and stuff I have done. I actually went through a lot of the newer acts. Like, I went through Act 5 as far as I could go. I really, 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 really don't like that in the new Act 5 you can't, if you've already beaten it, like with my Necromancer, I can't go and I can't fight Kitaba, who's the last boss of Act 5. I really dislike that. Because it's like, what the fuck's the point? Like, I want to fight... I can go back and fight Innocents,
Yeah.
But I can't go back and fight Kitaba in Act 5. I can go fight him in Act 10, which, not fun. That being said, a lot of the other act bosses are actually quite fair. Like, the final bosses for a lot of the acts aren't fair, but a lot of the mini-bosses are, in fact, quite fair. Like, the prison fight in Act 6, you actually fight Brutus as well as Chevron not at the same time, but like within the same fight, and they switch back and forth. So I don't think, if I recall, you don't actually fight both of them at the same time ever. And their mechanics are actually not that bad. Brutus is a little bit powered up, and his abilities can get close to one-shotting you. Like, as my Necromancer, who doesn't have very much defense, it's mostly just pouring everything into attack and minion attack. Like, I was able to survive one hit. I don't think I actually... If I died, I died like once in that fight. Keep in mind that I was like 20 levels above where I was recommended to be. But Chevron is actually the exact same thing as Act 4, except for she doesn't summon the books quite as often. And there's actually a lot more downtime in that fight, whereas she's, just auto-attacking you, which I think that is how you need to design fights. the Brine King, the end of Act 6, that one is a little bit overwhelming towards the, I think it's the 4th phase, because what you do is you fight him, he summons a few ads, pretty simple. 2nd phase, he draws the water in, lightning bolts come down. You have about half a second to avoid lightning bolts. I think it should be closer to maybe 2 seconds, or maybe, to be fair, just like a second. And then, but that phase is relatively simple. The next phase, he'll summon more ads. He'll do a few, like one more attack, but most of those attacks are telegraphed, so they're relatively easy to avoid. Or you can just tank them, which, you know, that's possible too. And in the phase 4, is the water again recedes closer. He summons a lot of ads, which gets in the way of pathfinding, and he also summons lightning bolts. Lightning bolts are effectively one-shots, like they killed me as a Necro, because they stun you, and they usually overlap. So that part I thought was a little bit unfair, especially because it's like, I don't mind even if lightning bolts are coming down faster. Granted, there shouldn't be that many of them. Like there was a certain, you know, there's like one place that you could stand. It's like, I could understand a lot of the game decisions if the game was better. And that sounds harsh, but it's not as good as it needs to be. It's not as responsive. The base latency is about a second and a half. Not a second and a half. Not a second and a half. Fucking 1.5 milliseconds. So, 150 ping is what I'm saying. Yeah. I found it before this expansion, the ping was consistently down to about 50, which is normal. That's fair. You know, that's within reason. But if you're going to have a lot of these fast-acting things, first off, you need to have better servers, because I believe the closest server to us is Washington, D.C., which is not ideal, but that's the only Eastern Seaboard server, so nothing we can do. But I've consistently gotten about 100 to 150 ping. It's very rare that it goes any higher than that, but it's like, if you want me to react quickly, I can, but you need the game to actually work well. On top of that, you need to, well, first off, one-shots should not be a thing. If they are, they need to be telegraphed for at least a second and a half, I'd say is fair. You know, going in the middle of like 1 to 2 seconds. Because it's like, you know, it allows people to be like, oh shit, this is real, like we need to get out of here, he's telegraphing, he's still going. You know? And, I think pathfinding needs to be really, really fixed, because the best example I have for this is in Act 3, when you go into the Lunar's temple and fight Piety. That pit in the middle with all the bodies really, really fucks with pathfinding. Like, it does not know what it wants to do. Because, like, you stand on one side of the pit, you click, and it will not go straight. It'll, like, curve and everything, and it's like, look, I can avoid this stuff. I have the reaction time. The game isn't cooperating, and that's not the player's fault. But for the most part, a lot of the areas, they might be wide open, but for the most part, I'd say it's relatively fair. I fixed my Templar a little bit, so instead of Enduring Cry, he has Determination, which gives you a lot more armor. Mana's never an issue with my characters for some reason. The one thing I'm good at is making sure I don't run out of mana. So, you know, cutting in half my mana doesn't do anything. So I will hopefully die less. I have a lot more survivability. I have a few more flasks, because I've gone through a lot of different things on my Necro to get a lot more, like, higher level flasks and stuff. I have, like, I forget what it is, but it increases all of your elemental resistances by, like, 30% for, like, 15 seconds, something crazy like that. So I'm probably gonna pop those on that character. I probably really only need 1 life flask, maybe 2. I might keep 2 just in case, but it's like, in some sustained fights, maybe 2 will work, but for the most part, I really just need, like, a mana flask. I have a Quicksilver flask because that helps a lot. I found that staves off the latency, mostly because I've already gone through a lot of those fights with my Necro. But you will be pleased to know, John, that after Act 5, Act 6 is really good. I'd say it feels a lot like Cruel Act 1, in terms of, like, it's really fucking difficult up to that point, all of a sudden it's, like, easy again. You're like, why the fuck are they so bad at balancing? Because they are. Like, Grinding Gear is horrible at balancing things, and, you know, I'm actually going to make a video about that after we finish Let's Play, basically saying, you know, why isn't there a new review? It's like, well, because it's basically the same game. I've been going back and forth a lot in between, like, should I change the number score? Should I change the recommendation? Because I feel like something deserves changed for the worse to get the point across that the game is worse now. but I'm not entirely sure. It might stay the same. I'd say the big thing that could fix all of this is to scale down the levels for Acts 1 through 10 and make multiple difficulties, because forcing people to go through the story mode on the absolute hardest the game can possibly be is wrong. Just, it's flat out wrong. So,
Yeah.
like, I very much disagree with that sentiment of, like, we want everyone to experience everything, and it's like, no. Not when it comes to difficulty. You know, Merciless was great because you didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
Bring back difficulty tiers, and basically all of the problems I'm talking about are fixed. Because normal, while it wasn't perfectly balanced, it was, for the most part, fair. You could get away with a lot more, which is what I think is better.
Yeah, it's more interesting.
Yeah. And someone like me who wants to, you know, go in there with a higher level character and just, you know, look at the lore, I can do that. And instead, now, if I want to have the lore of Act 10, I seriously have to pay attention to what I'm doing in terms of fighting. That's another thing, is like, I was going through Act 10 because I was curious. I was like, okay, how difficult is this? The lead up to Kitava, the final boss fight, is actually really easy. I was like, oh my god, this boss might actually be fair. No, it isn't. They one-shot you, and there's a lot of things where I understand what they're trying to go for, but there's too many mechanics, there's too many ads. One big mistake that they've been making a lot in the second half of the game is that a lot of the ads in boss fights do not drop corpses, and that is one of the biggest mistakes they've ever made, because that invalidates a lot of the builds. Necromancers, corpse detonation, anything that runs off of corpses, like, it's utterly useless now, because in the boss fight you don't have sustain. You know, you run in there with your minions, once most of your minions die, you don't have anything else.
Yeah.
And saying, oh, well, you're just not doing it right, that's not valid to me. That's an invalid response, because you're just it's not even a response, it's a dismissal, and that's not how you discuss, that's not how the game gets better. I'm going to be, you know, I think, like, that video, I very rarely make videos on, like, what I dislike. I try to do more about, like, what inspires me, because I feel like those videos are better in general, but, like, this video for Path will very much be, like, it's very much going to be, like, here's what you did wrong, here's why it's wrong, your opinions are invalid if you disagree with me, unless you discuss it with me. You know, but, so, have you been doing anything in Path, John? I was ranting for, like, 10 minutes there.
I haven't really touched Path all that much. I did have a lightning, like, an arc build that was going pretty well until I hit Act 5, and it's like I hit a brick wall.
Depending on how far you are in Act 5, I have a few characters that are, like, right there, so we could team up with that. Like, I have my my old elementalist, the original witch I had. She's something of an archmage. She has arc and val arc, but she also has, like, firestorm, she has a chaos golem, stuff like that. I also have my duelist. Of course, we have our scion and duelist. They're in, like, Act 3, right? Something like that.
I think so. Yeah, that might be, that might work.
Yeah, it would allow us to get through some of the other stuff. Granted, I've already been through a lot of the content, you know, solo, but that's with a character much higher level, most of it until you get to, like, Act 10. But I've been basically paying very, very, very close attention to my characters and trying to figure out how to fix them. I actually found out an easy way to fix them and to make sure their build is viable is to go through the labyrinth on normal difficulty, because normal difficulty labyrinth is terribly unbalanced. It always has been. So it's more equivalent to, like, a cruel version. Like, you know, you can be about 20 levels higher, and granted, you'll kill things faster, but they'll also kill you. So in terms of defense, which apparently is my downfall when it comes to that game, I found that it's quite nice to go through that and, like, you know, get the ascendancy points and all that, which I have done with all of my characters at that level. And, yeah, basically see if they're valid in terms of, like, or viable, rather. Yeah. And I found that works really well. I've gotten, you know, my duelist is up there. My Templar for Let's Play, he's Guardian now or something like that, so he has a little bit more defense on him now. Again, my Elementalist, my Necromancer has always been. So yeah. Because Izaro, especially the boss that you fight multiple times in the labyrinth, is like stupid. Because he's like, oh, let me just one-shot you. You're 20 levels above me, but that's okay. Like, he can one-shot my Necromancer, who's level 68, 69, and the normal labyrinth is like level 33. You know, like, what is wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
Is it because, oh, you didn't pour enough into defense? It's like, I understand that argument if Path was like Diablo, in terms of allowing you to respec, but it's not. So saying, oh, you needed to do this and that and that and that and that, it's like, well, how could I have known that, for one? And two, how can I viably fix this without waiting for a passive respec to happen? Because that's not a valid, again, that's a dismissal, that's not an argument, or rather a discussion.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Damn, we've been going for like 45 minutes. I'm kind of okay with ending it there. I mean, like, we only rambled about Path, but there's a lot to ramble about.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
So I hope you all enjoyed this episode of the podcast, and if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more like it, maybe even subscribe. Links for my social media links for my social media and whatnot are in the description below, and be sure to check out John's DeviantArt and YouTube channel and whatnot. That'll also be in the description below, just below the references and just above my stuff. Have anything you'd like to say, John?
No.
Well, that's all the time we've got for today, so until next time, don't die.